our brochure, and it's actually a pretty lengthy brochure, is you don't need a home to vote. So again, people are under the belief, and a belief that has been actually shared over and over again, that if they're not living in an actual house or an apartment at the time of the election, that they are not allowed to vote. So that is a very big piece of misinformation that really prohibits people from voting.
Welcome to Shoresides, where we explore the coastal North Carolina region's past, present, and future to promote community resilience. I'm Nicholas Magrino. From the chronically homeless to the recently displaced, every American citizen has the right to vote enshrined in the Constitution. But for those experiencing homelessness, exercising that right comes with its own set of challenges. We'll speak with Donald Whitehead, Executive Director of the National Coalition for the Homeless, to learn more about the struggles of unhoused voters and how North Carolinians who lost their homes in natural disasters or otherwise can still get out to vote on Election Day.
We are the oldest advocacy group that works directly with people experiencing homelessness. We work in a number of different ways. We work on educating the public and our elected officials. We work on drafting legislation. We provide an opportunity for people with lived experience to share their voices through our Speakers Bureau program, through our Technical Assistance program, and also through our Leadership Development program. In addition to that, we do a lot of work around voter education and registration, nonpartisan, of course. So a lot of different things we do in the community.
Whitehead believes that, statistically, the unhoused population in America are underrepresented at the polls.
We do only see typically, and when research has been done, only 10% of the population of people experiencing homelessness are actually voting. Now, that number goes way up when there is some assistance in registration or getting people to the polls. So we certainly believe that we are certainly underperforming when it comes to getting people out to be involved in voting. And so it's very important that organizations that are committed to nonpartisan election um, uh, work do work within that population.
While the Constitution guarantees that all Americans, homeless or not, have the right to vote, the specifics can vary from state to state.
The biggest uh, uh, kind of disparity comes with laws around the addresses that you need to vote. So some communities are progressive enough to say that if you can give me an intersection, then that's enough. That meets the burden for an address. Others, you have to have identification attached to that address. You can't use social services, and you have to have that address within 30 days of your registration. So there are a lot of laws that are barriers that are really unique to the homeless population that prevent more than 10% of that population to vote.
Recent regulations in some states aimed at suppressing the votes of certain groups can leave unhoused people caught in the crossfire.
Now, I don't think that when people are designing those laws that are cause a level of suppression, that they're thinking about people experiencing homelessness. Again, they only 10% of that population votes regularly. I think they're thinking about other groups. They're thinking about people who are new to this country. They're thinking about asylum seekers or dreamers. Sometimes they're thinking about communities of color. I don't think the target is people experiencing homelessness, but I think the residual damage is actually more complicated to overcome for people that are experiencing homelessness. So, IDs are golden in the homeless population. People lose them all the time. Sometimes they're stolen. Sometimes it's hard to get because a person has to produce, in most communities, a birth certificate. And the burden for getting a birth certificate is higher than most people would expect. So often, uh, some of the ID barriers are almost insurmountable for people to experience homelessness. You know, some states outlaw things like IDs for college, or IDs from the criminal justice system, or IDs that a shelter would use. So those very specific laws about IDs are very problematic to people experiencing homelessness.
In the unhoused community, misinformation about voting eligibility can spread. Some mistakenly believe that they need a permanent address to vote, and that is something that Whitehead and his organization have been trying to dispel. But that isn't the only kind of misinformation going around.
There's also information about what exactly that address is. And again, in some communities, you can use an intersection or a shelter or a soup kitchen, but people are led to believe that that is not adequate in a lot of communities. There's also, just the idea of how a person appears when they're heading to the voting booth. Sometimes people are turned away because of, whatever difficulties they've experienced, whether it be not being able to access shower facilities and other facilities on a regular basis. Sometimes the timing of when people can vote, people are not provided information about early voting or voting through the mail. And so a lot of people experiencing homelessness work every day, are there in the process of trying to access housing or jobs. So during the time that the polls are open on voting day, they don't have access. But they have been led to believe that that's the time that you can vote, and the only time, when there are a number of other things that you can do to be able to get in to vote.
According to Whitehead, the National Coalition for the Homeless is on the ground in 10 states this year to make sure that those living in shelters or on the streets know their rights. But in addition to disinformation, there are also other barriers that can prevent people from getting to their polling sites on Election Day.
We have a large portion of the unhoused population that are suffering from disabilities, both mental disabilities and also physical. And some of the voting locations, while they should be handicapped accessible, are not always there. And so it becomes a burden to do that. Again, people don't have access to facilities where they can regularly manage their appearance, and sometimes people are turned away by people who are volunteering at precincts.
The coalition's efforts in the field have paid off. Whitehead feels that presenting these unhoused voters the facts and dispelling misinformation have been enough to convince people to vote.
So we were in Cincinnati a couple of weeks ago, and we were at the largest shelter in Cincinnati, and we also went to the largest family shelter. And what we found is that people often came into the situation, like we were serving food as well, so people were interested in the food. And then we talked about voting. People were less interested because they felt that their vote didn't count. And so I think, instead of talking about the success of one individual, I can say that after we had conversations with people about what the stakes were and how some elections were decided by less than 100 votes in communities, people started to see their importance in the process. And I would say 100% of those people that said, "I'm not interested," and I don't think I have a role in it, all of those people registered to vote. So we were able to get, I would say, probably 30% of people that uh, in the shelter, those 30% who were reluctant to vote, we were able to move them with kind of the fact.
Last month, hundreds of North Carolinians lost their homes to the devastation that came with Hurricane Helene. Whitehead says that there are still plenty of resources for those who recently lost their homes to vote.
So I would say, don't let your situation be your destiny, if you will. Unfortunately, people who are currently unhoused face those same dilemmas every day. But your vote is important. This is a monumental election, and I know that you're dealing with some incredible barriers right now. one of my colleagues in Asheville. They have about 300 people with lived experience who are veterans, and I would just encourage people to use whatever resources are available. There's a lot of groups that are still going to be doing the get out to vote campaigns, even in the midst of the tragedy that just happened. So there are opportunities to make phone calls. If you go to our website at www.nationalhomeless.org, there's a number of resources that help with transportation, identification, getting you to the poll. Please utilize those resources. I know it's a burden right now, but we need you to be able to be involved, because there are a lot of implications. And again, we're nonpartisan, but there's a lot of implications about how emergency resources are being allocated to communities, and you need to be able to weigh in on some of that decision making process. So I just encourage people that can, and I fully understand that there are people who are not going to be able to participate in this election. I would also ask them to make calls, if they have that ability, to their legislatures, their elected officials, because I understand that there has not been an extension to the voting time period, and I think that is a tragedy. I think it's important that when Mother Nature steps in, sound minds have to step in as well and make sure that that God-given hard fought ability for people to be able to vote is preserved. And I just hope people have a change of heart at the judicial level, because I know these are judicial decisions. They need to make that the right decision when it comes to helping people get that opportunity.
Whitehead feels that it is critical for unhoused people to make sure their voice is heard. He thinks that elected officials have to know that this community will be holding them accountable at the polls.
It's important that your elected officials know uh, that you are a unique human being, and you have a number of different identities that you bring to the table, but all of them should be respected. Homelessness is a housing problem in this country, and our elected officials have the ability to be able to change that dynamic by producing the unmet need of housing that we have. But the only way that's going to happen is if they feel like homeless people, or people experiencing homelessness, and poor people are holding them accountable. So the more people they see on the voter rolls that are coming from shelter or coming from a low income community, the more likely they are to be able to address the issues that contribute to those situations. So we have to make ourselves important to those that make the decisions. And until we do that, the people who are showing up are going to continue to get the benefit from these elected officials.
From Shoresides, this is Nicholas Magrino. Learn more about Shoresides at shoresides.org. Thanks for listening.